The forests of upper New England and eastern, especially Atlantic Canada, are in serious trouble. These regions contain what is known as Acadian forest, a melange of the deciduous and coniferous trees found in eastern North America that support a wide-ranging biodiversity: moose and black bears, cougars, martens, fishers, and in places even wolverines, and a vast number of lichens, herbaceous plants, trees, and shrubs, many of which, unfortunately, are endangered. And in many, if not most cases, these species are endangered specifically due to the destruction of their natural habitats, forests, through clearcutting. This is largely done by what I have come to call the pulp cartel, a conglomeration of large and some smaller-sized businesses that specialize in converting native forests into conifer tree plantations, things that might look to the average person like a forest, but are really just tree farms, areas of low biodiversity that offer little in the way of food or shelter for the wildlife that would otherwise live there in those woods, and accomplish little in the way of carbon capture and the air and water purification that are the essential contributions of a healthy woodland. Tree farms give very little back to the ecosystem and to humans, but they're profitable, so much so that a vast industry has formed around their creation, converting vast swaths of native forest into tree farms to turn profits for large corporations and other business conglomerates. But the simple reality is tree farms are not forests. They do very little to nothing to promote biodiversity, contribute little to maintaining the environment. But as with so many things that can turn a profit, they have attracted big money, and big money protects its interests. And thus they have led to both corporate capture of the provincial government as well as corruption. For years now, tens of thousands of Nova Scotians have expressed their concern about the dwindling Acadian ecosystem within this province. And for years now, government regulators have turned a blind eye and given them only a deaf ear. Meanwhile, citizen protests have made the news while government in general pretends they don't exist. While all the while in the background, the department once known as the Department of Natural Resources, now known as the Department of Lands and Forestry, as if in an effort to declare their true allegiance lies with the pulp cartel, has held the responsibility of doling out grants. Amazingly, many to the for-profit operations of the pulp cartel, a concept I find fascinating and eerie. Government giving out taxpayer money for for-profit operations. It is direct and blatant corporate charity. It begs the question, if these businesses are so profitable, why are they seeking taxpayer handouts? But with the provincial government deaf and dumb and the federal government unwilling to intervene, and only citizens willing to stand up for our forests and defense of our environment and biodiversity, it should come as no surprise that over the years, many protests have been launched all throughout the province to defend against clearcutting. To try to mitigate growing public concern, the Department of Lands and Forestry changed their website in what I can only dub a simple-minded attempt to try to deflect public attention by sophistry, by trying to give new names to clearcuts and tree farming processes. However, when observers put boots on the ground, what they find is widespread environmental damage. Even if one is willing to ignore the simple scientific fact that removing portions of a forest disrupts its essential canopy formation, so that the forest is unable to create the shelter and humid cooling conditions essential to the lives of so many of the organisms that require a mature forest habitat, the damage done to the forest ecosystem is substantial, often not much different from an actual full-scale clearcut, though full-scale clearcuts still occur, and aplenty. With the government steadfastly unwilling to address the concerns of citizens and scientists, protests are becoming ever more frequent. The most recent protests have aimed to get the attention of a certain coward named Chuck Porter, who's presently the Minister of the Department of Lands and Forestry. Now, MLAs tend to like to style themselves with the title Honorable, though I'm of the opinion that honor has to be earned by something more than winning an election. It has to be earned with meaningful deeds. And the reason I refer to Chuck as a coward and not honorable is Chuck is far too much of a coward to meet with protesters in general. If they show up at his office looking to talk, his standard operating procedure is to have them arrested. In fact, this behavior came to be so much Chuck's MO that I recently posted the question in the online discussion boards of several of Nova Scotia's many conservation groups, representing about 5,000 people, asking if anyone has ever gotten to see Chuck at his office. Not one private individual could confirm. Not one. He's gotten to be very adept at ducking and dodging his constituents. So anyway, an idealistic and concerned young man named Jacob Fillmore saw the way the wind was blowing and realized he needed to take things a step further. And he cared so much about the rampant and massive environmental damage being done to this province's forests by the pulp cartel that he took it upon himself to begin a hunger strike. And, consistent with Chuck Porter's behavior, Jacob Fillmore was ignored. Until those many thousands of Nova Scotians concerned with the environmental devastation of our province began to stand in solidarity with Jacob and began protesting. Seeing the way the wind was blowing, on March 23rd, Chuck Porter conceded to have a meeting with Jacob Fillmore. But on March 24th, Chuck Porter showed himself to be a real class act. He bailed on his meeting with Jacob Fillmore, the next day offering up some lame excuse that he was away and would be happy to meet Jacob later on. Except, Chucky never did. So Jacob Fillmore continued his hunger strike, and as it became ever more clear to fellow concerned Nova Scotians that Chuck Porter was in no way going to talk to Jacob Fillmore, nor in any meaningful way going to address Nova Scotians' environmental concerns, especially in regard to clear-cutting, a protest bomb, so to speak, was put together to occur all around the province. And at the offices of MLAs all around Nova Scotia, people got together in support of Jacob Fillmore and the clear-cutting issue. And in many places, MLAs stopped and spoke with their constituents as, quote, honorable, unquote, MLAs would. Not Chuck the coward, though. Chuck's response to the protesters at his office was to have them arrested, including, perhaps especially, Jacob Fillmore, the thorn in the little coward's side. So, I've called this video Forest Nova Scotia and the 6-1 Fillmore slam dunk. And at this point you might be wondering, well, Cliff, what does Forest Nova Scotia have to do with Chuck Porter's behavior? Well, Chuck Porter is the Minister of the Department of Lands Forestry. And I'm going to propose what I believe is a very solid theory that Chuck the coward knows on which side his bread is buttered. He certainly knows where he's going to point his department's attention and resources. I'll point you once again to the document Public Accounts, Volume 3, Supplementary Information for the fiscal year ended March 31st, 2020, which you can see for yourself at the link noted below. DLF grants are on page 234. Note that there are 8 blue and 1 yellow highlighted areas. The areas highlighted in blue are conservation organizations that exist throughout the province. In the year 2020, they received, combined, a grand total of $218,552.71. Now look about middle left at the yellow highlighted area. There, you'll find the grants for Forest Nova Scotia Incorporated, which received, all by its little self, $1,220,000. If dollars represent commitment, both of the Department of Lands Forestry and the provincial government in general, then it is fair to say that the provincial government, from interim Premier Ian Rankin to the coward DLF Minister Chuck Porter, are about 6 times more committed to the message of Forest Nova Scotia than to the concerns of thousands and thousands of Nova Scotia's conservationists, which includes a great deal of highly educated scientists. No, they turn for their information to the forestry representatives of the pulp cartel, who understand one thing: how to convert forests into tree farms to turn a profit, and very little, apparently, regarding how to develop vibrant, wild, and diverse forest ecosystems. And with our government that committed to the message of Forest Nova Scotia, is it any wonder that the hunger strike of that well-meaning young man, Jacob Fillmore, was bound to end in this? In the end, when concerned citizens protest bombed the DLF offices and MLA offices all throughout the province, then, and only then, did the coward Chuck Porter finally make an appearance and speak with Jacob Fillmore. In an 8-minute-long conversation which was recorded, Chuck Porter spent a grand total of 2 minutes and 15 seconds speaking. We'll probably revisit what he told Jacob in a future video, but I'm going to play about a half minute of that clip now, because if you want to understand Chuck Porter, this is what you need to hear.
I am under the impression that you have the power to declare an immediate moratorium on clear cutting on Crown lands, and I would like to know why you refuse to do so.
That would be a government decision for sure, and it's not something that we've talked about as yet. I've been in the job about a month. You'll have to appreciate that. I'm working through many parts of this file. I can't tell you where that's going to go. I haven't talked to the Premier about that. He is aware of your protest, and we appreciate your position on that. We really do. But even Leahy doesn't say that clear cut comes to an end, Jacob. It's better for better practice forestry, and it's more targeted. And we've been working toward that over the last few years with regards to, the interim report does that, retention efforts and things like that are there. So those are important, and all of these steps, in my personal opinion, are quite important.
I have read the Leahy report in entirety, and if Chuck Porter read it, which I doubt, then his understanding is highly selective. Let me quote for you the section entitled Executive Summary, which is the report's equivalent of an introduction. It's the first thing it says, second paragraph. I have concluded that protecting ecosystems and biodiversity should not be balanced against other objectives and values as if they were of equal weight or importance to those other objectives or values. Instead, protecting and enhancing ecosystems should be the objective, the outcome of how we balance environmental, social, and economic objectives, and values in practicing forestry in Nova Scotia. A number of reasons are given for this conclusion, but the primary reason is that ecosystems and biodiversity are the foundation on which the other values, including the economic ones, ultimately depend. Leahy in no way promotes clear cuts. He advises more concentrated but limited forestry. Leahy's report simply recognizes that there is a need for pulp and timber and attempts to balance that ultimately lesser need against the absolute necessity of promoting healthy forest ecosystems that promote biodiversity and take care of our environment. And that balance is not something that the provincial government of Nova Scotia, nor the Department of Lands and Forestry, nor Chuck Porter in particular have shown that they are very interested in. Right now, it's pretty much clear cut away, full steam ahead. But oh wait, they're not really clear cutting anymore, because the Department of Lands and Forestry now has new terms for clear cuts. So it's all good then. Jacob Fillmore, wherever you are today, my hat's off to you, man. You did an awesome job, a job many persons would not shoulder. You stood up to Goliath, and you did it with dignity. I'm only sorry for you that Chuck Porter could not meet you with equal dignity. Sadly though, the odds were always stacked against you. If you just crunch the numbers and compare DLF's granting to conservation organizations versus Forest Nova Scotia, the pulp cartel's lobbying and propaganda organization, it would seem DLF values clear cuts in propaganda by a margin of at least 6-1. And I think your lesson to all of us, to beat odds like this, we're all going to have to make sacrifices. Thank you for watching. The Naturalist program is committed to the reliable coverage of natural science and environmental issues. If you like our program, please take a moment to subscribe and like.